hand to lift off from her perch, and smoothly makes her way down. Ash scolds Tilly for being reckless and suggests she keep Molly around while she's experimenting with flying. On the other hand, Tilly excitedly talks about her new discovery, explaining that as long as she maintains her magic output, she won't fall off. However, controlling her direction is still tricky. She invites Ash to give it a try, saying flying is an incredible experience, and the view of Slumber Island from above is breathtaking. Ash remains dubious and flatly refuses, reminding Tilly that she couldn't even activate the lightning stone and that she shouldn't risk her life. Besides, there's only one stone, so she can't fly with her even if she mastered it. Tilly sadly agrees and mentions she's also working on figuring out how to craft more of these stones. Ash asks if she's implying that the stones are man-made. Tilly confirms, saying their appearance and qualities seem unnatural, suggesting that the people who built the ruins had a deep understanding of magic, and she finds it a bit sad that the makers of these stones didn't leave any research literature about any of it. Suddenly, Maggie comes rushing at Princess Tilly, looking as if she's seen a ghost. When Ash notices the frantic bird making a speedy descent, she quickly grips Tilly and steps aside, clearing the way. Poor Maggie lands hard on the solid ground and for a moment seems genuinely hurt. Ash picks her up, and Maggie explains that she was blown away when she saw Tilly flying. She even thought for a moment that Sister Lightning had come to Slumber Island without telling anyone. Once Maggie recovers, she mentions that she's just come directly from Border Town, and Tilly then asks how the witches there are doing. Maggie replies that they're doing great, and that she was asked to deliver a bunch of letters written by them. One letter is from Lotus, and the other one from Evelyn, and as well as Sylvie also sent a letter. She also pleasantly presents a letter from the prince as well. Ash then offers Maggie a cookie for a job well done, and Maggie happily transforms into her little chubby pigeon form and flies off with the treat. Tilly can't help but notice how Maggie seems to get plumper with each trip to Border Town. Nonetheless, as they walk away, Tilly notices that Roland's letter feels unusually heavy this time, making her wonder what's inside. Later, once they're in the office, she eagerly opens the letter and finds a bunch of pictures inside. She's blown away by the lifelike drawings, convinced that only magic could create such detailed images. And one of the witches must have done this. But that's not even the craziest part. As she reads the letter, Tilly is further shocked to realize that these are real pictures of devils, not just some random art. Apparently, the scenes depicted are from when the Witch Association ventured into the Badlands to find the Holy Mountain. It then starts to ring a bell for Ash, and she recalls the legend of the Holy Mountain, said to be a legendary witch sanctuary where true peace and quiet could be achieved. However, Ash realizes that this was likely just hot air. They could simply live peacefully on Slumber Island without the worries of the outside world. The letter reveals that Kara, the former leader of the Witch Association, truly believed in the Holy Mountain's existence. She had found an ancient book in the eastern ruins that led her to believe the mountain was located in the Forsaken Lands. So she took the association past the mountains into the wastelands, but they discovered nothing but horrifying monsters. The letter describes these monsters as having incredible strength, quick mobility, and some even wielding lightning magic, just like a witch would. Out of 40 witches, only 6 survived, and they eventually found shelter in Border Town. It wouldn't be surprising if those devils were using the same lightning stones which Princess Tilly has right now. The prince's letter goes on to mention something puzzling as well. Apparently, there's a scribble at the end in the language of the 4 kingdoms. It references the Holy City, a battle with devils, and Alice's experiment with the Divine Punishment Army from 400 years ago. The prince has yet to figure out as to why this would be written in such a different language. After finishing the mysterious letter from the prince, Tilly decides to read Sylvie's letter next. Sylvie's letter reveals that she hasn't detected any disguises or traces of magic related to Roland Wimbledon. There are no other witches in Border Town who might be controlling the prince, which means that Prince Roland is truly her brother. The news absolutely shocks Tilly, and she's left trying to make sense of how it's even possible. She remembers that Gerald, Timothy, and Garcia were her father's first children, and they had formed a tight clique because of this very reason. Even Garcia, the youngest among them, was 6 years older than Roland. So, no one hung out with him and bullied him relentlessly. Logically, since Tilly was the youngest, she should have teamed up with Roland. But for some obvious reasons, that didn't happen. Roland's personality got pretty twisted because of the way his siblings treated him, and he was carrying a lot of frustration he couldn't dump on his older siblings, so Tilly ended up being his target. She explains that their father stepped in once he found out, and Roland did shape up a bit. Still, he was full of mischief. He was both immature and kind of funny, so she had to stand up to him, and he didn't bother her much after that. Not gonna lie, little Roland was pretty charming back then. Tilly further reveals that as Roland grew up, he didn't really change much. According to rumors, he was hot-tempered, uneducated, and relied solely on his royal status. Those traits were just a cover for his true weaknesses, fear, and fragility. Yet now he's standing with the witches, protecting them despite being seen as demons, and he's even willing to go against the church. She is having a hard time believing it, and Ash agrees. She says that even though she hadn't seen Roland in years, he seemed like a completely different person now. Apart from his appearance, he gives off a totally different vibe. Tilly then curiously asks Ash for her observations further. Ash explains that the biggest change is Roland's cleanliness. Both his appearance and his presence are simple and refined. He doesn't flaunt his status like other elites, and if it weren't for his hair, he might not stand out from an ordinary commoner at all. Ash adds that while Roland might seem normal, there's something about him she can't quite put into words, and he gives off a really nice feeling. The princess smiles and teasingly points out that she never expected Ash, of all people, to give Roland a compliment. Ash quickly gets flustered and insists she's just being honest. Nevertheless, Tilly is still curious, and wonders what could have caused such a drastic change in Roland. She suspects he might have used some means to become someone else, and the only way to find out is to meet him face to face. I love how this manhwa is putting so much emphasis on Roland's transformation. It's a refreshing change from other manhwa that often make you forget the main character doesn't belong in their current world. Sylvie further writes that she has mostly been exploring the northern mines for the prince. To everyone's surprise, they've discovered a huge amount of divine judgment stones. These stones grow out of the ground just like other ores. She's also seen soldiers at the border town using a type of metal weapon that shoots iron balls and bolts. The weapon is incredibly powerful and makes a thunderous sound, and she has even made some drawings of these weapons. Ash quickly perks up and points out that this rod-like weapon is exactly what caused her injury back then. Since they're allies now, she advises Princess Tilly to request a shipment of these weapons for defense. If the prince refuses, it would suggest he's not as reliable as everyone thinks. Princess Tilly responds that, first of all, they are not particularly defenseless, and secondly, those weapons are clearly vital to the prince, so he wouldn't give them away easily. Tilly is sure that making demands like that would only break their trust. Besides, she plans to visit Border Town during the winter anyway, so it'll be easier to talk to him in person about it. Ash quickly agrees, saying that Tilly can handle things however she sees fit. As Tilly continues reading the letter, she notices that Sylvie's sharp eyes missed nothing, because the letter even describes Roland's gifts to the witches, and Tilly gets absolutely blushy and embarrassed when she reads about how the prince gifted some underwear meant to cover a woman's chest, specifically for the adult witches. Tilly finds it completely ridiculous, thinking that gifting underwear is something only lovers do. So how could Roland have done that? She then recalls that he did something similar at the capital, and realizes that he's definitely started to resemble the Roland she used to know. Ash nods in agreement, noting that Roland was always a bit of a creep, so she tells Tilly they shouldn't go to Border Town during the winter. Back at Border Town, the chemist Sichi is in high spirits as he shares some exciting news with the prince. He's found a workable solution for manufacturing acid, but it requires a large amount of lead and a skilled smith to make a container out of it. He's heard that there's a witch who can precisely cut metal, and if she can handle the metal work, he asks for permission to use her assistance. The prince gives the green light for the witch's help, but mentions that he actually called him for something other than the acid. But Sichi is already way too busy with his current projects to get time for anything else. The prince reassures him that it won't take long and that all he needs is a few of Sichi's apprentices, not his top-tier ones. Sichi is finally curious and asks what the task involves. The prince then explains that they're going to manufacture soap, specifically for the common market. Despite its modest appearance, it will have the same properties as luxury soap, useful for bathing, washing clothes, and cleaning kitchenware. Sichi then frantically asks if the prince is referring to saponification, the process from Chemistry 101 that converts fats and sodium hydroxide into glycerin and soap. The prince confirms, and he seems pretty happy that Sichi is using the correct chemistry terms. However, even though Mad Scientist is thrilled about it, He still suggests delaying soap production because citizens can go days without bathing and usually clean their clothes and dishes in the river. The prince clarifies that soap production indeed has the lowest priority right now, but it's the byproduct that they desperately need. Sichi then asks if the prince is talking about glycerin, and the prince agrees, stating that producing glycerin is their top priority. Eventually, Sichi agrees to the plan, but points out that he won't have the time to handle it himself. The prince understands and mentions that he has some spicy intel that might interest him. Apparently, a sailboat carrying 50 commoners arrived this morning. Since there were a lot of people and they didn't seem like merchants, they were stopped by patrol. One of these commoners asked for Sichi, and it turns out that newcomer is an alchemist from Redwater City. Before the prince can reveal this newcomer's name, Sichi jumps with excitement, quickly realizing that this must be Charles, his former disciple. He's certain Charles has brought apprentices to assist him, and eagerly asks where Charles is right now, explaining that he was his most productive disciple, and it's crucial for the work. The prince informs him that they are registering themselves at the city hall. In the next scene, Lightning and Maggie are getting ready for their adventure, double-checking their supplies. Maggie proudly pulls out a string of sausages and declares that she's all set for the journey. Lightning raises an eyebrow and tells her that sausages won't do much against the dangers they might face, so she should grab a weapon or something. But the little pigeon makes it clear that if she runs into any divine judgment soldiers, she'll peck through their armor. Knowing arguing with Maggie is a lost cause, Lightning just puts on her glasses and they are ready to set off towards the westernmost point of the misty forest, and their goal is to explore the area and map out the forest's boundaries. As they head out, Lightning feels a wave of relief that Maggie is coming along. She's uneasy about exploring the misty forest alone, especially after encountering that devil in the woods at her last visit. She worries that if Maggie knew just how scared she is, she might poke fun at her. Lightning reflects on the wisdom of her father, who is the great adventurer. He had once told her that no matter what obstacles she faces, she must confront them bravely, observe closely, and understand that fear often comes from within rather than from the actual danger. With these words in mind, Lightning steels herself, declaring proudly that she's the daughter of her father and she won't be defeated. They continue their journey. Lightning finds it quite reassuring that they can simply just follow the river to not get lost. Suddenly, Maggie spots a towering mountain at the end of the forest. The mountain's sheer size makes it look almost mythical. They notice a deep, dark hole in the mountain and decide to dive into it further to investigate. Once they are inside, Lightning notices the black rocks scattered around in the area. Maggie even pokes at one of the rocks and reports that they don't seem edible. Lightning checks out the rocks and realizes there's some kind of ore. Since they don't know much about it, they decide to bring the rocks back to the prince for analysis. Lightning then mentions that they spent most of the morning getting here, which means this place is around 240 kilometers away from the border town, much farther than Longsong Fortress. Suddenly she gets curious and wonders what's beyond this huge mountain. Meanwhile, Maggie notices her feathers starting to turn black. Well, I would not be surprised if this place is a gold mine of coal. Nevertheless, Lightning decides to check out the other side of the mountain, so she tells Maggie to stay put and not move. She dashes out of the tunnel and starts flying diagonally towards the sea to see what's beyond the mountain. When she finally reaches the end of the mountain and looks around, she's absolutely shocked by what she sees. Later, the scene cuts back to the border town where the prince is studying a map of Grey Castle's royal palace, and he is busy planning his siege. Suddenly he hears a loud thumping noise. It's Maggie and Lightning peeking through the window, with Lightning looking particularly scared and anxious. The prince quickly tells Nightingale to open the window. Once they're inside, Lightning jumps at the prince, and he in return gives her a reassuring pat on the head, telling her to calm down and asking what happened. Maggie quickly starts flapping her wings and reveals that she saw black rocks and huge snowy mountains. But that is not what has Lightning so worried, because what really scared her were the devils she saw there. As she tries to explain, she's visibly anxious, so the prince tells her to calm down and steady herself before speaking again. The little adventurer finally takes a chill pill and reveals that in order to completely mark the misty forest, she headed west along the Redwater River and found a huge mountain there. Behind it, she saw a red mist that covered the entire range, and the mist had crimson blood-like color. It was hard to see through it, but it reminded her of Soraya's drawings, and she's certain that the red mist is the kind that the devils need to survive. A while later, Lady Scroll and other witches pay a visit to the prince. Seems like Roland has filled in all of the witches about the discovery of these devils. In the light of all this, Lady Scroll suggests that they should conduct an investigation of the Red Mist area. She points out that Lightning only saw it from afar and couldn't confirm if there were actually devils in the mist. Plus, even if they do find devils, they'll need to figure out if those monsters can reach the kingdom from the mountains. Wendy agrees with the Sister Scroll's recommendation, and further adds that while everyone knows that the devils are powerful, they are still not sure what defensive measures to take against them, so to prepare in advance, they need to investigate these monsters firsthand. The prince also agrees with the point they have raised, and asks if anyone has any objections. If not, he's ready to move forward with the plan. However, the prince isn't sure how to conduct the investigation safely. That's when Anna suggests using hot air balloons. She explains that they can paint the balloons to blend in with the sky and use the clouds as cover. They'll fly over the ocean as an additional safety measure. Lightning then suggests bringing Sylvie along since her abilities are perfect for a scouting mission like this. The prince agrees and decides that he'll join the expedition as well. However, Nightingale quickly voices her concern, insisting that the prince shouldn't risk his life, and it seems like other witches are also against the idea of the prince tagging along. The prince then clarifies that this isn't as risky as it seems. He explains that if the monsters could fly or scale mountains, they would have already spread across all 4 kingdoms. The fact that they're still confined to the westernmost region suggests they're not as dangerous as everyone fears. Besides, the prince thinks to himself that he has more knowledge about alien civilizations and stuff, and he can easily figure out how advanced they are just at first glance. So, if he can see the devils and their city himself, it could be extremely helpful in figuring out how to defend against them. With that in mind, he tells everyone to calm down, assuring them that they'll be watching from a safe distance. He adds that if even scouting from afar was too dangerous, he would never have agreed to this expedition in the first place. Nightingale finally agrees, though she seems a bit embarrassed for overreacting earlier, and she still insists that the prince isn't allowed to stray from the group during their journey. The prince agrees and points out that Anna, Wendy, Soraya, Sylvie, Nightingale, Lightning, and Maggie will all be going. He tells them they'll leave in a week and advises everyone to carry revolvers along with the necessary rations. He also tells them to practice with the revolvers in the meantime so that even the non-combative witches can defend themselves. The prince then decides to take a look at the ore Lightning has brought back. The little adventurer quickly reports that there were more of these rocks near the mountain, and the area covered by them is 10 times bigger than the border town. The prince notices that the rock is lighter than typical ores, so it's definitely not a metal or regular ore. Since it's black and found at ground level, it could be coal. He tells Anna to burn the rock a little, and once her green flame touches it, the rock begins to burn with a blue fire. It doesn't take long for the prince to recognize that this is high-quality anthracite, a type of coal that burns with minimal smoke. Lightning is surprised that this is what coal looks like because she expected it to be brittle and dirty like charcoal. The prince explains that this coal has been broken down and refined. Most coal looks like rocks in its basic form, and higher quality coal, like anthracite, is harder and shiny on the outside. He adds that coal isn't rare in Grey Castle because Fallen Dragon Ridge and Silver City both export it. It's primarily used for warmth, but this thing can easily replace charcoal in smithing, which is more environmentally friendly because it means fewer trees need to be cut down. He thinks to himself that even if they transition to electricity and gas, coal remains a versatile and cheap fuel source. It can be used to manufacture coal gas, hydrogen, and asphalt, and even generate electricity. Therefore, establishing an open-air coal mine would be more advantageous than relying on imports. It looks like they'll need to produce more steamboats and a coal factory in the westernmost region in order to ship all of the coal into the border town. The scene cuts to the king's city, where inside the palace, an alchemist demonstrates their new discovery, which is a combustive snow powder created by the Alchemists Association. When the explosion goes off, the brass bowl goes flying into the air, leaving Timothy utterly flabbergasted. The old alchemist explains that if they increase the quantity and pack it tightly, the powder could be powerful enough to shred armor and flesh. Timothy is thrilled to hear this, and gladly offers the old man a generous reward of 20 golden royals. He instructs him to start building a snow powder factory in the capital immediately, and to continue researching the powder. He promises that if its effects in battle are as impressive as claimed, he'll grant the alchemist a dukeship and territory. The old man bows in respect, but one of the knights in the chamber points out that while the invention looks promising on paper, it might not be very useful on the battlefield, because it requires a fuse and has limited lethality, affecting only a half a pace wide area. Timothy is deeply troubled after getting reminded that this powder still needs innovation. He reflects bitterly that if it weren't for Garcia snatching the alchemists who were in charge of researching the snow powder, he would have already dominated Grey Castle. But still, he's relieved that the remaining alchemists were skilled enough to sniff out the recipe. Suddenly, a soldier bursts in with urgent news and reports that the troops sent to the western region have been wiped out and returned to the capital in defeat, each carrying a letter from Roland Wimbledon. Timothy reads the letter and sees that Roland is clearly disappointed with his strategies. Roland calls the attack on the western region a severe mistake and warns that he'll make Timothy pay for it. He also says he'll attack the capital in the second month of autumn, planning to show that Timothy's throne isn't as safe as he thinks. Timothy is absolutely livid after reading the letter, his anger practically boiling over. Back with the witches, they're all geared up with revolvers for their shooting practice, and the prince is eager to see how they perform. As the ladies start shooting, it quickly becomes clear that they're struggling. Their shots are going in every direction except toward the target. Roland's enthusiasm dies down and starts to feel hopeless about their lackluster skills. However, it's not all doom and gloom, because Anna stands out among everyone by hitting the target with such finesse you would not believe. The other witches are fascinated to see this, and even the prince is bewildered by her performance. He notices her clean aim and steady posture, and wonders if Anna has talent beyond just her knowledge. Despite the revolver's noticeable recoil, her arm remains perfectly steady, leaving the prince impressed and curious about her hidden abilities. Meanwhile, Anna is basking in her glory after hitting the target perfectly. However, the prince quickly notices something off, and we can also see a hint of magic at play near the trigger of her gun. With a suspicious look in his eyes, he leans toward Anna and scolds her, saying that no one is allowed to use their abilities during firing practice. The clueless Anna asks why, and the prince explains that if enemies have stones of divine judgment, she would be helpless without her magic. He wants everyone to be prepared for real combat situations where their magical abilities might not be available. Prince then covers her ears and tells her to try again, assuring her that she won't feel scared this time. Lightning quickly asks Maggie to come over and cover her ears too. I find it fascinating how even the kids are handling these guns like they're just water pistols. With her ears covered, Anna quickly fires a barrage of bullets, and they all hit the target perfectly. Seeing this, Wendy and Nightingale give it a go as well, and soon enough the girls are having a blast while shooting. Later, we see their balloon floating in the air, camouflaged to blend with the sky. The prince announces that they'll be practicing dropping projectiles from the sky and plans to attack the capital in the second month of autumn, so everyone needs to start practicing right away. Wendy could not help but feel thrilled to be so high in the sky, and points out how the entire western region looks as small as the palm of her hand. The prince, however, explains that the area is indeed not very large, and directs her attention to the wasteland to the north, which is where they'll need to go later. Lightning notices they're already quite high, and comments that she can't see anything below. The prince says they are high enough, and inside the balloon basket, we see a nuke-like bomb. He explains that they'll be practicing by dropping this fake bomb, just like they did on the ground. He adds that since this is only an experiment, the bomb they're using is much smaller than the real ones and weighs about as much as 4 nightingales. Even though this one is smaller in size, they still need to treat it seriously. Anna seems really curious after hearing about the weight of this bomb, and curiously asks the prince since when Nightingale became a unit of measurement. The prince dramatically coughs and tells her not to worry about the details, instructing her to just get started. They drop their first bomb, and Anna quickly shuts the downward door in the basket. The prince is happy to see that they've become so familiar with the procedure after all their training. Wendy then asks him if the bomb can really hit the target from this altitude. Roland admits that it does seem improbable, considering they're dropping it from 1,000 meters. However, he explains that the bomb has exceptional navigation capabilities, and its high altitude actually contributes to its guaranteed accuracy, and this is all thanks to our little explorer, Lightning.